I am Prashant. I am really grateful to EML team and SEC team. So on 16th of September we have an event. I just want to show some introduction or the trailer of the event.
दो बिल्कुल अलग लोग अलग अलग रास्ते से खुलकर आमने सामने आ गए थे। डॉक्टर साहब देखिए सब लड़ रुके ना। हम खुद से कर सकते हैं। पुलिस कैसे? हम ही पुलिस। All this around you, people come along. In short, I want to make a difference, and not a small one. ये आप ठीक नहीं कर रहे। उसका हमको पता ठीक कर रहा काम कर। हम अगर अन्याय के खिलाफ आवाज उठाना अपराध है तो हम अपराधी हैं। नया ड्राइवर ज्यादा ही मांगा जाता है। ऑनेस्टी बिना पक्षपात के हिम्मत और बहादुरी की सब पुलिस डिपार्टमेंट का बहुत महंगा रहना है।
यार இந்த நம்பர் நான் ईमेल நம்பர் கொடுத்து இருக்க மாட்டேன் வாட்ஸ்அப்ல
ये छोटा जिल तो है और अभी बड़ा पतला जिल में आकर के फंस गए हम लोग।
हम भी जानते हैं बहुत घटना खोलने के वाइफ है।
नंबर
इंडिपेंडेंस डे 15 अगस्त से पहले हम शेखपुरा को चंदन लोटे से आजादी दिलवा देंगे। अगर एक बात की औलाद है ना सामने आके चला जाना बहुत राज होगा।
हेलो
सिर्फ मौत नहीं
ये ब्रो अरे
राज होगा।
हेलो
कौन सा डिस्ट्रिक्ट है?
I am inside the bro inside you inside yes bro we need no laptop also available you just come and make your drive link give me drive link वाला बेटी
15 अगस्त से पहले शेखपुरा से तुम्हारा पिता भी कराएंगे क्या दुनिया से।
So this was the trailer of Khaki, the Bihar chapter, which was a real life inspiration from the story of IPS Amit Lora. He is coming for a lecture on 16th September 6:30 p.m. at CIT. Do come for the lecture. And once again, thank you EML team, thank you SEC.
16 फोटो ओके ब्रो
Good evening everyone. We the team of Mural Lectures, IIT Madras, in collaboration with the Student Ethics and Constitution Commission, welcome you all to the fireside chat with Mr. Prashant Bhushan on his journey of advocacy and activism. And in the session, I kindly request all of you
वीडियो का
keep your mobile phones silent to avoid any
அவார்டு கொடுக்குறப்போ ஒரு ஃபோட்டோ இப்போ
Today, we are honored to have Mr. Prashant Bhushan, a renowned lawyer, politician and a social activist with us. Mr. Bhushan has been at the forefront of numerous landmark cases and social issues like Anna Andolan, the 2G scam, Narda Bachao Andolan and a lot other important PILs. His dedication and special interest in PILs have had a profound impact on the Indian legal landscape and our society. Besides being a prominent lawyer, Sir has always been an active politician. He is a founding member of the Sambhavna Institute of Public Policy and the India Against Corruption movement. Also, to our interest, Sir has been a student of IIT Madras also. Now I invite Dean of Student Affairs, Professor Gumadi, to present Mr. Bhushan with the Anvasana. Continuing with the event,
Okay, sir.
now I invite today's moderators, Cleveland and Nakshi, to occupy their seats on the stage with sir.
இப்போ ஆகுது இப்போ ஆகுதா வயதுல
Good evening, everyone, and thanks to
Go for it, Lama.
First of all, I would like to once again thank you, we are really happy to have you here. It's a great pleasure. So, starting, I think we should be starting right away. So, we all would like to know how was your first expression of IIT Madras now, given I think not much have been seen, but since your time, some changes have been made. So, how is it now?
So I have just seen that I haven't had the time to go through the campus physically, but I just saw the film at the Heritage Center, the short film, and I can see that from my time in 73, there have been in the last 51 years, IIT Madras has grown enormously, the percentage of women at the campus has increased enormously at my time. In my batch, there were only 2 girls out of more than 200 boys. Now I believe that the girls are more than 20%. The campus looks more organized. At that time, this was the early years, 70 years of IIT Madras. So it didn't look, now it's very well kept and very beautifully laid out. I can see that there are a lot of new buildings. Even my old hostel has now been completely reconstructed. And IIT, from everything that I've been reading, one of my fellow students who went on to complete his IIT would come with me from Allahabad, from my school. He keeps coming here and he keeps sending me information. And I keep reading about IIT Madras also. And I can see that for very good reason it is ranked as the #1 university or #1 institute in the country. And I am very proud to have been a student of this place, even though for a short while, for only 1 semester. But I'm very happy to see the campus as it is and see the kind of students who are here and the work that they have been doing. It's very, very encouraging.
Sir, often when we speak about IIT or students of IIT, so what comes into mind is they are going to pursue some tech field or they are going to do that. So, being one of those students, what inspired you to transition from pursuing an engineering path at IIT to focusing on law and philosophy, in which your career eventually folded?
So my career had a very convoluted and unusual path. I came to IIT thinking that all students who are interested in science should go to IIT, and I came to the engineering school here. But after, so there were 2 reasons why I left after 1 semester. One was that I realized that I was not really that interested in engineering. My interest was really in physics. The other thing was that I was very homesick. I had come from Allahabad and I had a 2-year-old kid sister to whom I was very attached at that time, and that was one of the actual causes of my very serious homesickness, also because of which I left. When I went back, I had come after ISC, which was 11th, I had to do my 12th, and since the exams of that 12th intermediate exam were in April and I had gone back in January, they didn't allow me to take physics chemistry because I hadn't done the practicals there, though that would have been the easiest thing for me to do, physics, chemistry, maths, for my intermediate. So I had to take 2 new subjects apart from maths, and I took economics and logic, which were new subjects for me, but and for the first time I read Samuelson's 8th edition at that time, from cover to cover, in those 2 months, and I found that even economics was interesting. So I was wanting to repeat. I was thinking of repeating the year with physics, chemistry, maths, because my real interest was in physics. But then I found that economics was also interesting, so at that time I got exposed to Bertrand Russell, and I read a lot of philosophy during that time, and I felt that I was also interested in philosophy. So I thought that instead of repeating the year with physics, chemistry, maths, I'll do a BA with philosophy, economics, and political science. And in Allahabad there was no honors at that time, because you had to take 3 subjects. So I started studying that. For a year I remained quite interested in economics. I studied economics quite seriously. But then my interest in philosophy kept increasing and my interest in economics dwindled. I was studying physics on my own as well. And therefore, when I finished my BA, I wanted to do further studies, an MA in philosophy. But as it happened, during that time when I was doing my BA, Mrs. Gandhi's election case also took place, which my father was doing on behalf of Rai Narayan against Mrs. Gandhi. And I attended the hearings in Allahabad as well as in the Supreme Court, in the High Court and the Supreme Court. And then the habeas corpus, because emergency had been declared, the habeas corpus case came and my father was arguing that as well in the Supreme Court. I attended that also. Then the case one on Bharti Review came, which also I attended in the Supreme Court, which Mr. Palkiwala was arguing. So I got a sort of, my father was a very well-known lawyer at that time. But I was still, till that time, I was not particularly interested in pursuing a legal career. But then I found that even law was an interesting subject, was an interesting profession. And people, my friends and family told me, look, if you study philosophy, do you realize the kind of colleagues you will have, the kind of teachers, the kind of philosophy departments? At that time, philosophy departments were really in bad shape. Of course, even law was in bad shape, meaning hardly any good students would go to either philosophy or to law. So I felt that that was correct. And if I wanted to do higher studies in philosophy, I would really have to go abroad. I would have to go to the US. So I decided to formally enroll in law and therefore pursue LLB. But informally, I continued to study philosophy and physics on my own. In the next 2 years, I realized that my interest in philosophy and physics kept growing, and therefore I wanted to go abroad to do a PhD in philosophy of physics. So then I applied to a couple of US universities, to MIT and Princeton. Both gave me admission. Princeton also gave me a scholarship. So I went to Princeton to study, to do a PhD in philosophy of science, which meant philosophy of physics. After about 2 years there, and having seen the kind of work that was being done in philosophy and philosophy of science also, because I had become a logical positivist by that time, which meant that I regarded most of metaphysics and philosophy to be meaningless. That means they were just playing intellectual games and not really increasing the understanding of anything. And I also realized for doing the kind of work that I wanted to do in the philosophy of physics, I would actually need to study physics a lot more. I would effectively need to spend the next 4 years studying physics. At that point, I was not inclined to spend the next 4 years studying physics. So I then decided to drop that. I'd done my master's. I didn't complete my dissertation in philosophy. I came back and then got enrolled as a lawyer. I had already done my law degree, except my final exam had not been held because in Allahabad the session was running late, and before the final exam could take place, I had to go to Princeton. So I came back, took my final exam, then got enrolled as a lawyer. And fairly soon after becoming a lawyer, I got interested in public interest issues. And environmental issues, civil liberties issues. I got involved with the People's Union for Civil Liberties as well, then with the Bhopal gas leak, which all happened soon thereafter with the Narmada Bachao Andolan, thereafter with a lot of other issues of corruption, the Bofors case, and I went on to write a book on Bofors as well. So that's how actually my career took a very convoluted. But one thing that it taught me, see, my father was a very liberal person. When I said that I want to go to IIT, he never pushed me to become a lawyer. He said, all right, fine, go. When I said that I want to leave, he said, all right, come. But what do you want to do thereafter? I said, this is what I want to do. He said, all right. When I wanted to study economics, he said, okay. When I wanted to study philosophy, he said, okay. When I wanted to come back to law, he said, fine. His philosophy was, and I agree with that philosophy, that no education, if done seriously, is ever wasted. Everything is useful in building your perspective, building your personality. And I found that true in my case. Because of my varied interests, very wide-ranging interests, and my pursuit of different subjects at different points of time, it has all come in useful in all the public interest cases and all the public interest work that I do. I find if I didn't understand enough science, I would not have been able to do, or didn't understand enough physics, I wouldn't have been able to do some of the cases that I have done, for example, on nuclear energy, etc. So, in fact, the very first case that I did was about the limestone mining in the Broon Valley. And Vandana Shiva, who is a physicist who came to me for that case, came to me because she had heard that here was somebody who had just come back from the US, he was studying physics. Incidentally, at Princeton, two of the physicists that I studied under, one of them went on to win the Nobel Prize, and Professor James Peebles, and the other, Edward Witten, developed the superstring theory. So then she came to me that we need somebody who understands physics and who understands science in order to do this case. So I found that to be a useful prescription for education in general, life in general, and I have always believed that children should not be forced to choose their subject so quickly, and to that extent I think this American system, which allows you in your undergraduation to take up many different subjects, to study many different subjects, and thereafter gradually choose your minor, major, etc. That's a useful system.
Sir, that was very insightful, and like most of the works I've read of you, it's like an overload of insights. And the fact is that I'm very honored, very grateful to know that even you have gone through some of similar emotions that we as students go through right now. It's really interesting to know that. I think we can move on to questions that are your expertise. So the first question is that, sir, we had a discussion regarding social media before. So as an extension to that discussion, you have been someone who's been championing free speech. So how do you think that social media has impacted public discourse on legal and political issues? Like you had mentioned about the social dilemma and your specific interest in Twitter. So what do you think about that? What do you want to tell the students here?
So I don't know how many of you have seen this documentary called The Social Dilemma. Some of you may have. Okay, some of you have. It's a good documentary which should be watched. I think it's on Netflix or on one of these OTT platforms. It shows you, it tells you why social media has become a polarizing instrument. See, when you watch YouTube, when you do Twitter, when you do Facebook, what is fed to you why the algorithms of these social media platforms are always similar things. So if you are watching one particular kind of videos, for example, if you watch Ravish Kumar on YouTube, YouTube will automatically feed you videos of other people who are somewhat like Ravish Kumar. If you watch, for example, Arnab Goswami on YouTube, you will be fed stuff which are people who are similar to Arnab Goswami, what is called the Bodhi media today. So what happens is that you get exposed to only one point of view. You will either get exposed to this point of view or that point of view, and the algorithm is designed in this way because they realize that this is the kind of stuff that you like watching. And so one effect is that it is polarizing people. Half the people, some people are going this way, some people are going that way, and their opinions have become more and more divergent. The other impact of this is that because you don't get exposed to the other point of view, therefore very often what is happening is that you are being fed some things like, it's called this WhatsApp university, many of you have heard. WhatsApp groups have become very proficient in purveying a lot of falsehood, misinformation, hateful information, etc. So, a lot of the information that you can be fed in by the social media can also be false. And you will not realize that it is false because you are only being exposed to that. So a lot of people start believing that false information and they don't get to see the other side at all. So what I have realized, actually, I was just telling her about this US election, telling these few students over there that most of the people like us or people with whom I tend to agree on most things, are people who would be supporting Kamala Harris in this US election. Because Trump appears to be a very crass, misogynist, bigoted kind of person who doesn't appear to have a very deep understanding of most issues. But I have come to realize, actually this happened during, this realization came to me more starkly during COVID. Because during COVID, I saw that most of what the mainstream media, all the other social media, etc., were all saying something which eventually I found were not correct. I started studying COVID, what is COVID, how serious is it, where did this virus originate, whether there are any treatments for it, whether masks are useful, whether lockdowns are useful, whether vaccines are useful. I spent thousands of hours going through all this literature on both sides. And what I realized was that what was being fed to us by almost the entire media, including the social media, was by and large not correct. COVID was not as serious as it was made out to be, not as lethal as it was made out to be. In fact, people who were otherwise healthy hardly had any chance of dying of COVID. In fact, many people, I believe that a very large number of people who died due to COVID died because of the fear that was created by the government and the panic that was created by the media and the government. Because if you believe you've got COVID now, you've tested positive, and that now you will die because your oxygen will go and so on and so forth, then A lot of people die just because of that. They collapse, then they go to the hospital. They'll start testing their oxygen after every 15 minutes, etc. As soon as they find that their oxygen level has come down, they'll go to the hospital, get themselves admitted. In the hospital, they will not be treated. They will be given some treatment which may not even be right for them. They will acquire hospital infections and so on, and therefore a lot of people, in my view, died because of the unnecessary panic that was created. Masks, I know, were not useful. I mean, there are any number of studies now which show that masks have a marginal utility in preventing infection and are harmful because they make you breathe in your own carbon dioxide. They stop the oxygen coming. Vaccines are now, as time passes and more studies are coming out, have been found to be counterproductive by and large. They were very marginally helpful, but the side effects outweighed the beneficial effects of that. Lockdowns were counterproductive. Children were hardly in any danger of anything due to COVID. It was well established, well known, therefore there was no need to close down schools, no need to have lockdowns, etc. So then I realized that sometimes the entire mainstream media, and when I tried to publish, when I tweeted a meta study on masks which showed that masks are not useful, my Twitter account was taken down by the social media company. So there was censorship being practiced, and I realized that sometimes even the entire mainstream media is telling you something which may not be correct. Even the social media may be telling you something which may not be correct, and it's only when you go a little deeper into it and segregate on the basis of, well, who is commercially benefiting from this. So actually I have done 2 cases in which we had the occasion to look at peer-reviewed scientific papers on the benefits. So one issue was whether soft drinks are harmful to health. Now we all know by and large that soft drinks are harmful because they contain a lot of sugar, especially high fructose corn syrup, a lot of chemicals, colors, other additives. They also contain this caffeine. Now, and it contains a lot of acid. If you segregate the studies on the basis of which studies are funded by the industry, by the soft drink industry, directly or indirectly funded, versus those studies which are not funded by the industry. And this is something which actually tells you something important, and I'll come to that. You find that there is a difference of night and day, meaning all studies funded directly or indirectly by the industry will say soft drinks are not harmful. All studies which are not funded will say soft drinks are harmful. Same thing about genetically modified organisms. All studies funded by the industry will say genetically modified organisms are not harmful. Virtually all the independent studies will say that they are harmful. Tarjei Ravik, who was a Norwegian bioscientist, in a film called Life Running Out of Control, at the end of that he says something very important. He says, look, this field of genetically modified organisms is such a technical field that the only people who understand this field are people who are really working for the industry. And therefore there are very few independent scientists in this field left. And therefore you will only get that point of view which the industry, which the genetically modified food industry is wanting to push. And very difficult for you to find any unbiased opinion on this, even in scientific papers. So this is something, actually when I went to Princeton. I keep going there every 2 years or so back to the university, and I see that the campus has changed enormously, just as the campus here has changed enormously. And many of the new departments which have come up, Department of Biotechnology, etc., are all funded by the industry. So today, most of the research that is being done is industry funded. Now there are areas where industry may not have any vested interest in pushing things which are harmful. But there are also areas where industry is interested in pushing things which are harmful. And therefore, it is very important for universities to retain their independent character and not be funded by the industry, at least in those areas where the things that they may be pushing are harmful. Because unfortunately that percolates right down to education. To today, medical education is largely controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. They are controlling what is taught to doctors, and therefore all doctors will tell you that if you have high cholesterol, you should take a statin drug. Now, this is because the statin drug industry has become so big and so powerful that it is virtually controlling medical education, and therefore even your family doctor will tell you the same thing also. And therefore, I have realized from experience that you have to be very careful, especially when you are dealing with things where there is a powerful lobby or a powerful industry which has a direct commercial interest in that area. You have to be very careful. For example, in these wars, I was talking about the US election. Now, Trump is quite bad, ostensibly very bad, and I agree with that. He is quite bad. But there is one respect in which he is better, in my view, than Kamala Harris, and that's a very important thing. Robert Kennedy, who is one of my sort of most favorite candidates, has now retired to support Trump because he says 3 existential reasons. One, he says that look, Kamala Harris and the Biden administration is promoting the war in Ukraine. Totally counterproductive. It is only being promoted because the military-industrial complex has a commercial vested interest in continuing that war. And Trump is committed to withdrawing and coming out of that war. Number 2, that Harris-Biden administration is committed to censorship of news and information on the basis of it being false, etc. He says, I believe that this is most dangerous. We have seen it in COVID, we have seen it in so many other cases, that what happens is that these commercial vested interests then censor out that information which is harmful to them. So therefore, this is the other issue. And the third, he says, the food and the pharmaceutical industry has been virtually poisoning the health of our people, especially the children, because they have promoted so much processed food, so much bad drugs and vaccines, etc., that they have destroyed the health of the American people. And this has happened because you have a revolving door in the regulatory agencies, that the Food and Drug Administration, you will have somebody who goes from the industry, sits there to regulate the industry, then comes out, and this revolving and goes back to the industry, and therefore this revolving door continues. And therefore, he says on these 3 existential issues, I am more with Trump, because Trump is not so controlled by what is called the deep state. And to that extent, I agree with that. So therefore, one has to look at both sides. You have to see everything in all the shades of grey rather than just in black or white. So that's something that I have realized.
Sir, as students, we are all glued to social media, and most of our content we consume through social media. I'm pretty sure that your perspective might have made us a little more cautious on what we consume.
Yeah, so sir, you spoke about about the ineffectiveness of vaccines, and then you spoke about how the entire hiatus which was created behind Corona. But at the end of the day, we see that there are millions of people who lost their lives at the end of the day, and saying that a great chunk of that was because of panic. Does it not seem a bit far-fetched?
No, in my view, it is entirely possible that if, suppose, the government had said, and which is the truth in my view, that COVID is just a very infectious kind of serious flu. That's exactly what it is. It's just a more infectious kind of serious flu. And if it had also told people that, look, if you get this COVID, then you need to take ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and vitamin D, which were known to be very early on. They were known to be 4 things which greatly reduced the duration and the symptoms of COVID. Greatly. In fact, everybody in my family got COVID. My father also at the age of 95 got COVID, or 94 got COVID. They were saying hospitalize him because there won't be any oxygen and so on. If he had gone to the hospital, I have no doubt that he would not have come out alive. I have no doubt. All the people that I know who went to the hospital and died at that time were people who not only they had had the vaccine, at least 1 dose of the vaccine, and virtually nobody that I know who didn't have the vaccine and didn't go to the hospital died. So what was happening in the hospital, I saw what was happening because my uncle and aunt who died in the hospital during that time, I saw what was happening. Doctors and nurses were not coming. You were lying in the room and you were acquiring hospital infections. Many people were acquiring hospital infections. So if they had not created this panic and they had told people to treat it like a serious case of flu, then in my view, much fewer people would have died. Much fewer people. See, this panic itself, this fear, this lowers your immunity. This creates so much anxiety in your mind. So there was no reason to create so much panic about this. So that's what I feel.
This panic, like you spoke about, was it just for India or for the whole?
No, for the whole world. For the whole world, so much panic was created globally. India was just following the lead from the US. Actually, there is a very good book on this called The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert Kennedy Jr. Very, very good book. It has 3,000 references of government data or from peer-reviewed medical journals. Every sentence in that book is supported by either government data or peer-reviewed journals. Several hundred doctors helped him to curate that book, including one of my friends, Dr. Jacob Puliel, on whose behalf I had done that case in which the Supreme Court finally said that yes, you cannot issue vaccine mandates saying that people who have not received vaccines can't travel or can't do this, that or the other. So you should read that book to understand what happened during COVID, what this man Anthony Fauci did. Anthony Fauci was actually leading the world's response on COVID. And India was just following ultimately what the US was doing. So that will tell you a great deal about what has happened.
Thank you, sir, for this answer. I think now a lot of people must have asked this question during those times. So moving on. When we were reading about you, one thing was like the number of cases which you have been a part of. 500 cases in good cause. This is a term which we read about when we were researching. So in this career spanning across decades, was it there some specific cases which you found were really interesting and which paved the way how your career after them turned out in this big career of yours?
So one of those cases was the Narmada Bachao Andolan case. So that case was important and useful because there were three major issues which were highlighted in that case. One was the issue of displacement by large dams. The other was the environmental impacts of large dams. And the third, because large dams had become, Jawaharlal Nehru had glorified the Bhakra Dam as the temple of modern India. So large dams had become kind of the symbol of development. And this was the project where young educated activists, many of them from IITs, etc., who became members of the Narmada Bachao Andolan, started questioning the established wisdom on that. And the more they questioned, the more it got exposed. In fact, when the Prime Minister says, or when somebody says that the Narmada Dam is the lifeline of Gujarat, I have always said that it has been the curse of Gujarat for the reason that the Narmada Dam swallowed up the entire irrigation budget of Gujarat for the last almost 50 years. For 50 years, almost every penny of the irrigation budget of Gujarat went into this one project. More than, by today, about 1 lakh crores have been spent on this project. If they had spent even 25% of this money on what is called micro watershed development, which means catching the rain where it falls, making small check dams, every inch of Gujarat would have been irrigated many years ago, 30, 40 years ago. Today, this Narmada project irrigates not even 5% of Gujarat. Not even 5% of Gujarat after having swallowed the entire irrigation budget of Gujarat for the land. Apart from all the environmental impacts, all the social impacts of displacement, etc. So therefore this was a project which has opened the eyes of the country to and has challenged the established and the received wisdom that dams are the temples of modern India. So therefore, you have to sometimes examine these claims which have become part of received wisdom in order to deconstruct the truth of that claim. And Narmada project did that, and therefore I was I got very highly educated about large dams, about environmental impacts of dams, about social impacts of dams, about cost benefits of dams. So the cost of irrigating 1 hectare due to this project is several crores. The cost of micro watershed development for 1 hectare, if you make a check dam and so on, would be probably 1 lakh or so. Instead of 1 lakh, you are spending 1 crore for that, and it's also taking you so much more time and so on. So that was one case. Another interesting case that I did was against this Kudankulam nuclear power project. So again, there is this received wisdom that nuclear power is high technology, it will reduce carbon emissions and so on and so forth. When you do such a case, you get into the details of it and you realize that what you are being told is not correct. Firstly, nuclear power is the most expensive way of producing power. The cost per megawatt of setting up a nuclear power plant is more than 20 crores per megawatt. The cost of setting up the same plant in a thermal plant is around 4 crores, 3 crores, 4 crores. Cost of hydel maybe 6 crores. Cost of solar has also now come down, it's 6 crores or whatever. But more than that, nuclear power is a very, very dangerous way of producing electricity, because one accident, this Fukushima or Chernobyl, they have, the loss that they have caused is greater than the benefit of all the nuclear power plants in either Russia or in Japan. So one accident can be so catastrophic. And it's not that it has no carbon footprint. It is true that it is not burning carbon. And the last thing is that there is no safe way of storing nuclear or spent fuel. In Fukushima, most of the fuel that caused all that radiation contamination was the spent fuel which was stored there. Till today, that the US Commission and the courts have told the US government to find a way of safely storing the spent fuel, but till today, not one single safe storage of spent fuel has been found anywhere in the world. There is not one place anywhere in the world where there is safe storage of spent fuel, which remains radioactive for hundreds of years. So therefore, that was another case where you get to learn. This GM case, genetically modified foods case, was another very interesting case that I did recently, which is about the cost benefits of genetically modified foods. Again, see, as I said, that everything that is getting fed into the mainstream media and including the social media is funded directly or indirectly by this GM industry. And therefore you get only one side of the picture. When the Supreme Court set up an expert committee of 6 scientists to go into this whole issue, they gave a very detailed report in which they have said that, look, India is not yet ready for genetically modified foods at all. India does not have, proper laboratories, etc., to do the testing. You need to have you will require at least 10 years of serious work to set up adequate labs to do the testing and so on. Besides, there are some other, one particular kind of genetically modified foods, or the herbicide-tolerant variety. They say that this is totally unsuitable for India, and they have highlighted many other problems, etc. So therefore, in all these cases, when you, especially if your client is somebody who understands, in the Narmada Bachao Andolan case, there were these young people with the MBA who were very knowledgeable, who had studied, understood things. Similarly, in the nuclear, the Kudankulam case, the people who were briefing me were very knowledgeable, some of whom have written books about this, and even in the genetically modified. So we were getting inputs from the world's best independent scientists on this, some of the finest people. So therefore, in these cases, you get to learn a lot. And I have found that my career in public interest litigation has made me learn about so many things, so many issues which I would have never learned had I not been doing those cases. And I could do those cases also because of my very varied background in physics and philosophy and economics and so on, and of course law.
So if I recall correctly, the main argument that for pushing Narmada project was that there might be some negative consequences, but the development will outweigh it. And I remember there was a cost-benefit document talking about, the hectares of land that will be irrigated, where people will be displaced to, and so such sort of things. But we saw that that was not happened otherwise. I'm pretty sure this is the same argument that many of the projects, even the nuclear project, also uses. So in that sense, what exactly is development? if to you? What defines development in that way if it's not this?
Yeah, so development has to be seen in a very holistic manner. Unfortunately, sometimes those people who are in charge of policy see development in a very narrow sense. They don't look at, they don't have a 360-degree view of what would be the consequences of this particular project. So for example, on this herbicide-tolerant varieties of genetically modified foods, so the expert committee said that this is completely unsuitable for India from a socio-economic point of view also. Of course, one problem is that herbicide tolerant are those where genetic modification has been done so that when you spray a lot of herbicide or pesticide, all the herbs around it, the weeds will die, but the plant which you want to protect from the weeds, that will survive. But it means that that plant is able to take in a lot of herbicide on it, and this herbicide is highly toxic for health. So when you eat that plant, you will be eating a lot of those herbicides also, which have gone inside that plant has absorbed that herbicide. But apart from that, they said that look, in India there is a problem of unemployment, labor and so on. In our particular context, you cannot or you should not have, should not be using those technologies which will remove labor, which will essentially create more unemployment. So you have to see everything holistically. For example, on the Narmada project, you had to see what is the environmental impact. So one of the issues was that the environmental impact studies had not even been done before the dam construction was started. So in that 3-judge bench decision earlier, one of the judges said that look, the project can't go on without doing those environmental impact studies. It's having all kinds of environmental impacts. It is submerging forests, it is the dam is submerging land, the canals are also doing various things. So you have to study the whole range of environmental impacts, the whole range of social impacts, what it will do to employment, what it will do to other things, and then come to a conclusion whether it is good for development or not. So, but unfortunately the commercial vested interests want to push a very narrow view of development. That this will lead to so much immediate jobs, this will lead to jobs in that project, etc. It may lead to jobs in that project. Firstly, those will be temporary. Even if they are permanent, you have to see how many other jobs are going to get displaced or whatever. So that's why you have to take a very wide view before you see whether this is really development or good for development or not. In that Sambhavna Institute which we have set up at Palampur in Himachal, one of the programs that we have is called Nai Dishaएं, which is for students who are exposed to the current model of development versus alternatives to it. So what could be the alternatives? What are the other ways in which things can be done? So that's the idea, so that students also get exposed to what are the problems with the orthodox model of development and what are the alternative ways in which you can look at development or do development.
So thank you for your answer. One very interesting thing which arises from here is like you spoke about how effective nuclear energy is. So I would like to know your views on the statement that nuclear energy, being someone who has being your environmentalist by yourself, nuclear energy has been something which has said to be our best deal to fight against climate change. Given thermal power plants, they have a very high carbon footprint, and the hydro energy which you yourself fought against in the Narmada case, and then the other forms, solar energy, which is ineffective as of yet. don't you think that nuclear energy is one of our best deals against this fight against climate change, given the growing demands of energy which the world has right now?
Firstly, the demand for energy is not growing, so this is also a myth which has been created. Actually, when the Enron plant was set up, they gave a projection of the demand of energy in Maharashtra in the next 10, 20, 30 years, etc. Now it's 30 years down the line since that plant was started being set up, and the energy demand is actually not higher than what it was almost 30 years ago, hardly higher. With the result that the Enron plant is lying closed because its power cannot be used because its power is so expensive. So the rule is that you first use the lowest cost power, then you use higher cost power. So they don't need that much power. Of course, if there was a demand for that much power, they could have used that, also that expensive power, but there is no demand. So the demand projections were highly inflated. And the reason why demand is not going up and is not likely to go up much is because as technology is improving, the efficiency of use of electricity or use of energy is growing. So today you have bulbs which 1 watt LED bulb gives you the same light as a 50 watt fluorescent bulb. A car today is 4 times as fuel efficient as cars were 20, 30 years ago, and so on. So therefore this business that the demand for electricity is increasing is not correct. It's not really increasing. Secondly, you see, you said solar energy. Now solar energy today, actually India is well suited for solar energy because India lies closer to the equator. So the incidence of solar light in India per square meter of land is much more than in the northern countries. So solar, if you put, so say rooftop solar. Now rooftop solar, if you have a meter, reversible meter, should be allowed everywhere, should be encouraged everywhere. Actually, we have put up in Sambhavna Institute, we have put a solar 5 kilowatt or 10 kilowatt solar plant, which is very highly effective. So what we are saving by way of electricity cost, so it saves us about say 1 lakh per year in terms of electricity cost, and its capital cost was 5 lakhs. So by way of interest, you can say you are earning almost 15-20% interest on that capital investment. Of course, there was at that time some subsidy also, some government subsidy on the capital cost. But today, even without subsidy, so the technology for solar cells has improved so much that today solar energy is highly competitive with thermal energy. Thermal energy, that is the carbon guzzling energy, highly competitive. And yes, with hydel, yes, there are various problems. There are environmental problems, etc. And with thermal, the cost is not very high, but there are these issues of carbon emission. But with nuclear energy, you have two such fundamental problems. Firstly, the cost is so much higher, 10 times higher than the cost of solar energy. Why would you put such a risky plant? And this Kudankulam plant has been functioning at virtually 20-25% plant load factor, because it is shutting down most of the time due to various problems, malfunctions and so on. Why would you do that if you can generate the same electricity very safely through solar, wind and so on at a much lower cost? Definitely lower than nuclear. Definitely lower. So, and On rooftop solar, there is no problem of land, etc. In fact, it will save you from heat radiation also. In India, one of the problems is that all houses get heated up. If you put a solar cells above your house, it will save you from that heat load also. And it would generate electricity without using any land also. One thing that is said about solar is that it uses a lot of land. But there are so many places where you can put it up, where you don't need land. Over canals, over this, that and the other, there are so many places.
Thanks for explaining this, sir. Now I think it would be unfair of us if you do not pass on the mic to our audience. So given we are running a bit short on time, so we might not be able to take a lot of questions, but yeah, some of us.
I am happy to stay till as long as the students want me to stay. हमको कोई टाइम की प्रॉब्लम नहीं।
Hall.
Thank you for your presence. Great talk. This is a bit different from the technology-based discussion we've had so far. So this is trying to understand your view on a little bit of paradoxical situation that has come now because of this. Bail is the rule and jail is the exception, right? And all this. So it is now evident that higher judiciary is more in the favor of giving bail. Right, while lower judiciary is not so much, and all this is coming in the backdrop of the statement which Honorable Chief Justice said that there's a sense of fear among the judges of lower courts, and that there could be career setbacks for them, right? And this is again vis-a-vis this, the fact that judges are appointed to the higher judiciary by their own judges, right, in the consultation of Chief Justice and so on. So how is there a career setback or a sense of fear among lower judiciary when they know that the higher judiciary prefers bail? Just to understand this paradox.
So, career setback can be due to many things. One is that, so there are two reasons why career setback is also a reason, the fear of career setback. And the fear is not coming so much from the higher judiciary, the fear is coming from the government. The government also plays a role in the elevation of judges or the promotion of judges. It's not merely the collegium. Actually, this government has adopted a very novel way of frustrating the appointment of any judge that they do not want, even if the collegium has recommended that. What they do is, they either sit on the recommendations of the collegium without acting on it. So, government has to either accept it, in which case they have to issue the notification for the appointment, or they can reject it and send it back to the collegium once. If the collegium unanimously reiterates the same name, then the government has no option but to issue the notification. But the government, this particular government, has resorted to a new strategy of either just not responding to the recommendation of the collegium if the collegium recommends somebody that they don't want, or even if they respond and they reject it and send it back, and if the collegium unanimously reiterates the same name, then they don't issue the notification. So the judges know that their appointment depends not so much on the collegium but on the government.
Okay.
Unfortunately, though the law is that the collegium is supposed to select the judges of the higher judiciary, but what is happening today in practice is that the government is still selecting most of the judges. So it's a fear of the government. And if they know that this government does not want Kejriwal to get bail, the lower court judges will normally go along. This is what has been happening. The other problem is that there are these two laws, UAPA and PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act and Lawful Activities Prevention Act, in which the bail provisions have been made so stringent. It says bail will not be granted unless the judge comes to the conclusion that there is not even a prima facie case against the accused. Now, how does a judge come to that conclusion that there is not even a prima facie? Trial has not started. In Umar Khalid's case, trial has not started. In the Bhima Koregaon case, where people are languishing for 6 years, trial has not started. How does the judge come to the conclusion that there is not even a prima facie? They have fabricated some evidence, they have planted these using Pegasus emails into their things saying that they are going to assassinate the Prime Minister. I mean, it has been shown to be planted, but trial has not started. How does the judge record a conclusion? This will all come out in the trial. So therefore, those lower court judges were finding it unable to give bail also because of the stringent provisions of UAP and PMLA. Supreme Court has found a way of going around it. They have now said in a couple of recent cases that if there is no likelihood of the trial being completed within a reasonable time, then irrespective of UAPA or PMLA, you can grant bail. Even if you cannot record a conclusion that there is no prima facie case against the accused. So therefore, hopefully now things will become smoother. Otherwise, I mean, it's totally unconscionable for some of our finest human rights activists to rot in jail for six years without even the trial starting. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Hello sir. Sir, I want to know about the loopholes of Indian Constitution. As I have seen, all the Indian political parties have used Indian Constitution as their tool for their own development through the amendments. So, being an advocate, or more importantly, in the Supreme Court, what is the opinion of the Chief Justice? Like how they see, like how they are using this as their tool for their own development rather than the people of India. So, can you sir highlight all these loopholes which are there in the Constitution and how they are using it as their tool for their own development?
No, they are not using any loopholes. They are just not following the Constitution in some cases. For example, use of bulldozers for demolishing houses of people who are accused of some crime. So they say that this person participated in some riot and therefore we have gone and demolished his house. Now the Supreme, for a long time the Supreme Court didn't do anything about it. Now the Supreme Court has woken up to this and now they have started saying that look, merely because somebody is accused of a crime, you can't demolish his house, his crime has not been proved. And even if his crime is proved, demolition of house is not the punishment that you can give. You can't demolish somebody's house just because he has committed some offense of rioting. You can impose whatever punishment is provided under the law. Demolition is not a punishment. So therefore, what is happening is that governments have been violating encounter killings. So many encounter killings are taking place in cold blood. They are totally against the rule of law. But unfortunately, you see, the courts have not really taken such serious note of all this that they should have taken. So it is not as if there are some problems in some smaller problems in the Constitution, but it is not the loopholes that are being exploited. It is really the violation of Constitution which these parties are doing.
Sir, one more thing, just on add-on on this question. So just as you said, there is no loopholes in the Constitution. But in 2019, BJP government, like in the reservation, there was a ceiling, upper limit ceiling is 50%. But beyond that also, they gave 10%, they additional gave this 10% as a EWS category. So do you think this is constitutionally right, or what is your opinion?
That's a complicated question. I can't go into that because it has a lot of history, geography, etc.
Thank you.
Hello sir, good evening. You fought against the issues like electoral bonds, and now after it being shut down by Supreme Court in order to bring in the political funding and transparency. Now how do we see the future of political funding, especially when there is strong nexus between politics and industry?
See, unfortunately, a lot of the money is given in cash by companies to political parties, and that avenue has not been plugged. That avenue could have been plugged if the government had brought a law which said that political parties, see, when demonetization was brought, the Prime Minister said that one of the objects of this demonetization is to have a cashless economy, so that people transact only through banks. All transactions are through banks. Now, ordinary people cannot be made to transact everything through banks, but at least political parties and candidates could have been made to. If you had brought one law in the Representation of People Act, one amendment which said that political parties and candidates contesting elections will only do their financial transactions relating to their election through banks, and any transaction made by cash will be considered to be a corrupt practice for which the election can be set aside. That would have plugged this loophole of cash. Otherwise, people are giving cash, taking cash, using cash, and therefore this malaise is continuing. I mean, it didn't stop even with electoral bonds. Even with electoral bonds just opened another avenue of anonymous funding. That now even your money in the bank could be given anonymously to a political party through electoral bonds. You could always give cash. Cash was not stopped. Cash could still have been given.
Yeah, thank you sir for your answer. I think we would not be able to take any more questions given we are running a bit short on time. Okay. This will be the last question we'll be taking.
Yeah.
And sir, so it's very inspiring. I was not aware that you have done physics and then philosophy. So like I was then my MSc physics, and then I wanted to switch to philosophy. So I read a lot of Barton Russell, Whitehead, and like what is like my purpose? Like what I believe my purpose is like I'm working on a metaphysics using the Whitehead. I think you are.
You can come with me to the
I will ask a simple question
to the guest house, because your question may require some.
I will ask a simple question. I believe that will be helpful for everyone.
Okay.
So when we asked for the what you said for the development, so you said like people are looking things narrow while making the decisions. So narrow sight can be by two reasons, like one of the ignorance that people are not aware, the people who are making policies, and either by their personal interests. So like these two things can be possible. So can you suggest a thing that should be done for the holistic development? If the person who is making policy is not aware, like lack of knowledge, can cause that thing narrow sight, and if he is having some interest, so I think it will be helpful.
By and large, this narrow looking is being done largely because of vested interests. However, see, there are many laws, for example, the Environment Protection Act and the rules made thereunder, etc. They require, or the Wildlife Protection Act, they require somebody who is doing an environmental impact assessment to look at various things. Even Land Acquisition Act, for example, the new Land Acquisition Act, requires the government or the authorities to examine alternatives and various aspects in order to see whether this is the most suitable land for this particular project, or whether there can be some more suitable land for it, whether the costs of land acquisition for this project will outweigh the benefits etc., etc. So you can sometimes put it in the law itself, requiring the authorities to examine A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H before taking a decision on whether the project should go ahead or not. So there are ways of doing it, and it has been done in some cases, but unfortunately these people, see, the people who are in charge of environmental impact assessment, they are also from the government. I mean, I have come across under the Wildlife Protection Act, if the government gives sanction to cutting of trees inside a protected wildlife area or making some project inside a protected wildlife area, they have to give reasons as to, under the act itself, they have to give reasons as to why. They have to do a full impact analysis, how it will affect wildlife, whether it will affect, not affect, in what ways it will affect, what are the various alternatives, etc. But they don't do all that. They just say approved, approved. So they are violating the act. We are currently doing a case in the Supreme Court about this, that look, this is not the way in which they can do this. So the act provides. But what is unfortunately happening is that people are not bothering about all these things. They are just riding roughshod, thinking that nobody will be there to hold them accountable.
I'm really sorry about that. We might not be able to take more questions. You can understand our constraints.
You have to clear the hall. You can come outside.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the moderators too. Now I would like to call Dean of Student Affairs, Professor Gumadi, to present Mr. Prashant Bhushan with the momentum. And packet also.
All the other bits. Push up. Push up.
We request our guest to leave his message for the IITM Madras community in our EML yearbook.
Push up. इतना फोटो से कैसे मैं होती है पर्चल कंप्रेस ಹಿಂಗೆ ಫ್ಲಾಶ್ இந்த படி தரது ஆமாம் ஜூம் அவுட் பண்ணு அந்த பையன் வரட்டும் அதான் இங்கேருந்தே வச்சுக்கிட்டு பண்ணுறேன்
Thank you, sir. With this, we conclude the event. We thank our guest for his time and the valuable experience you shared with us from your journey. Your insights and views on legal, political, and social issues were informative and thought-provoking. Your perspective has certainly enriched our understanding on this crucial topic, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to thank our audience for joining us today. Thank you all. Now I invite
stage for it.